Stellar Blade has been on everyone's mouths for a while. Since the inception of this game, since it was announced, people have been losing their minds over it, and I recently saw it trending yet again. So I'm thinking to myself, what could there possibly be? What other information could there possibly be that is controversial more than what has already been stated with the girl's butt, the way she looks like a normal person, what she's wearing? Those shoes are actually pretty cool, by the way. I would love those. But not like if I'm running from my killer or something, because I mean, that's like, could you imagine someone now suddenly chasing you and they're lighting up in the dark, so now you can't hide, and they're zip up so you can't stop and take them off? But then I wonder why hard R is trending. Again. So on IGN, the headline says,
Sony says Stellar Blade art referencing racist language was unintentional, will be patched out, art will be removed in Stellar Blade's Day 1 patch.
And I was very confused, wondering how would that get past the eyes of the developers? This is what everyone's offended over. Graffiti that says hard that just happens to be right next to the art shop.
Wow.
I mean, subsequently, the article goes on to claiming that in the game, the art shop references Roxanne, who is one of the game's information brokers. The hard graffiti, meanwhile, can be found in numerous areas throughout the game. In a statement released to IGN, PlayStation said that developer ShiftUp had no intention of creating offensive artwork, promising to remove it as part of Stellar Blade's Day 1 patch. Here's the issue with this, right? That people don't understand, which is just crazy to me. You can look at anything and it be offensive. What if somebody sees something else in the game, such as a cat, and it just happens to have the F letter next to it in some graffiti, someone signed their name? I mean, anyone can look at that and interpret it to mean pussy. Hard R itself is not a slur. You can reference it to people using a slur word and it being the worst version of the word or the commonly unacceptable term for it, but the phrase itself, hard R, isn't a slur. I would think that intelligent people would know that. There are a lot of things that have a hard R. Dishwasher, dumb and dumber, stupider, ridiculous. I mean, it's a definition. A hard R is a rhotic sound that is strongly enunciated or emphatic. In English accents, it is a post-vocalic consonantal R that is different from the absence of an R in a non-rhotic accent or from an R-colored vowel. People are even discussing it in Reddit. And what I like in the thread is that the person who claims he is native US learning Spanish says that the N-word slur is primarily an American thing. So maybe people have forgotten this, but Stellar Blade isn't just going to be in America, from my understanding. What may be offensive to you or a very small sect of people in America is not going to be offensive to everyone else. And here's the thing, if you start bending over backwards all the time, constantly trying to please people that are always upset and will always try to find things to be offended over, it will never just stop at that. Because once you see something on the wall, you make two things that are obviously disconnected, and you decide that you're going to be mortally offended over it. Obviously, you have not lived life long enough, because if things like that are so disconnected make you feel offense to this degree where you have to yab about it, then you're living a very sheltered life, because nobody else saw that. I would have not put those two together. The word hard is not a bad word. The letter R is not a bad word. Hard R together is not a bad phrase. And my only regret is that the company found that it was necessary for them to apologize and change this, which in my opinion is the wrong move to make in a situation like this. I would have been like, you know what? I'm sorry that you feel offended. It sounds like a you problem. But this is what happens when people have too much power and they have too much time and privilege. They try to oppress everybody else, but disguise their need to oppress others as them being victims. It doesn't stop there. Maybe this woman, her neck is too long. That's offensive to people with short necks. These things are too pale. That's offensive to people with pale skin. I'm sure wherever you look, you can find something to be offended over, if you look hard enough. It's different if you're just poking fun, but when people take this seriously to the point where where their lives become unbearable, and as a result, they feel the undying need to make everyone else's lives unbearable, now it starts to become an even bigger issue. You begin to tick off a lot of people. Stellar Blade has been controversial for the most non-controversial reasons, since the game and its marketing materials were announced. It's actually crazy to me that we live in a time where people find normal bodies offensive, find mundane words offensive, and even find people, air, water, and leaf litter offensive. I mean, if your hair is too short or too long, and you don't look physically the way other people want you to, they say you don't exist and find you offensive. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be that person, but what happened to people getting mental attention? Are there seriously no more psychological evaluations? There are so many bigger issues at hand. There's so much talk about when it comes to movies, the philosophy of movies, actors, characters, and TV shows. But people are getting offended over some random graffiti of a very innocent word that just happens to be next to an innocent letter. I mean, do people not understand the law of averages? Human beings evolved to recognize patterns. That's why when you're sitting on the toilet and you look down at your marble floor, you will eventually see animals and faces in the patterns of the tiles. It's why when you look up at a cloud or almost anything in your environment, you can make out the shape of something else that you're familiar with. There's actually videos of this all over the internet. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. People can take numbers and make them mean something. You can look at someone and study their face and interpret that they like you or that they don't. But if you're really bad at social cues or you have some issues upstairs, you're not going to notice that the person is actually quivering in fear of you because you're being weird. Sometimes the nonsense of the world just astounds me. And gaming studios and movie studios honestly need to start pushing back, because I think the issue is that everyone feels as though they absolutely need these elements in their games. And while that is somewhat true, we forget that these studios also need the games as well. That's why many people who made games or projects decide to crowdfund them. And I can understand, because it's probably better to cut out those middlemen. And now I understand the issues with that approach because of all the scams and whatnot, but it's crazy to me how backward people are bending just to make sure that there isn't a speck of dust on their table made of sand.
Pocket sand.
The ridiculous controversy surrounding Stellar Blade over this whole hard art issue is a prime example of oversensitivity. And continuing to cave to these unnecessary social pressures, it's setting a dangerous precedent. When a game or any form of media, like movies and shows, includes something that is universally recognized as offensive, I can understand that. I can understand people wanting to take action and setting the record straight, like the whole minstrel show thing. You understand that they're common sense, but then common sense nowadays is not so common. What I mean by that are very egregious things, such as putting kids in roles meant for adults, if you know what I mean, snuffing out life realistically, actually putting animals in real danger, like dogs and stuff. You understand, there is a balance, I get it. That's not what I'm talking about. The main point here is that the little tiny trivial things that offend people where no actual harm is being done, no physical harm is being done, that is what people are choosing to focus on. And not everything that can potentially be perceived as offensive warrants being changed. All it serves to do is give up too much power to those who are just easily offended by small and unintentional things. And as we've noticed, walking this route only serves to control and limit creativity in game development, which that's not just impractical, it's basically harmful to the industry. And everyone can see that. Everyone's gonna be too afraid to be creative because they're afraid of offending someone out there somewhere. Game designers shouldn't have to constantly worry about minor issues that most people won't even notice. And obviously, yes, I understand there is a balance. On one hand, the studios and developers or showrunners try so hard not to offend anyone that they end up either offending everyone or even appear to deliberately provoke people. So it's extremely tiring nowadays to just always worry about offending people rather than just having fun and creating art. Like, you could be in the rain, walking in the rain and dancing in the rain, and somebody freaking 2 miles away in their apartment is looking out at you with their binoculars, seething because you're offending them by playing in the rain. I swear to God. And I'm using that as an example. It's an actual thing that happened, by the way. I think last year or 2 years ago at the time this video was made, because someone was playing in the rain. I think it was Drew Barrymore or someone else, whoever, it doesn't matter. But this person is playing in the rain and someone got viscerally angry because they were enjoying themselves. You can't make this up, I swear. And in the grand scheme of things, it might not seem like a big issue that the game developers decided to make this change. They altered it. It's not detracting from the game, so it could be seen as, trivial alteration, right? Just necessary thing. Comes down to knowing which battles to fight, which ones to concede. The problem is, the very people who were offended by this very obvious non-issue in the first place are the ones that will continually chip away at creators when they find the next thing that's offensive, because they managed to change something that was a non-issue because they didn't like it, so they're going to find the next thing. And this is the problem we're facing now with franchises like Warhammer and Star Wars and almost everything else you see, to be honest. By them trying to be less offensive and more progressive, they're actually becoming more regressive and sowing disharmony. You're also now angering people so much that you're creating a group of people who are less sensitive to genuinely offensive material, including those who would have a legitimate problem with it. So it's a really delicate balance of ethics and of what is necessary and what is not. And I think the great question out there still remains, when do you bend the knee and when do you stand and lock your legs? I know that many developers rely on funding and investors, and I think that's part of the problem. For anyone to make it now or be put on the map, you have to go through these influential people or consultant firms that are very freaking shifty. And if you decide to stand up and do things on your own with little to no money, they can make your life hell and stonewall you from the industry.
If you're a creative working in AAA, which I did for many, many years, put this stuff up to your higher ups. And if they don't see the value in what you're asking for when you ask for consultants, when you ask for research, go have a coffee with your marketing team and just terrify them with the possibility of what's going to happen if they don't give you what you want.
Look at all the actors out there now who have opinions different from the mainstream media. If they dare to speak out differently or against the mainstream media, they are blackballed from Hollywood, barred from getting jobs, and or the media turns everyone against them because it has the power to do so, just to set the record straight. It's easy to look at things on an individual level because it simplifies placing blame by putting a face to the issue, but the problem is actually more widespread than that. It's not just one person, it's a group of people and the principle of a group of people, not a specific group, but a hive mindset of people trying to set fire to everything that is holy. I talk about this a lot because it's an interesting discussion and I do want to get different perspectives, but it's become so prevalent now that it's impossible not to notice it everywhere I go. Before, people would say things like, it's not that bad. It's not like it's everywhere. But now, it is literally everywhere. It's in anime. It's in gaming. Those are the two things that I held close to my heart. And I used to think, as long as I have these things. But gaming, my guy, that is the one thing I could always count on. And I swear to God, people make fun of me because I haven't watched certain movies and TV shows, stuff like Zootopia, which I should have watched. The reason is that when I was growing up, I didn't watch TV or movies. Of course, if there was a really big trendy thing, then maybe I'd watch it with my family, or if it had anything to do with dinosaurs or animals, which is funny because I didn't watch Zootopia, and I should have, I know. But it's because I was a gamer. I still consider myself a gamer, even though I don't have as much time as I used to for gaming, but I try to fit it into my life because I need to have video games in my life in some way, shape, or fashion, even if it's just a bloody mobile game. I was so chest deep into video games, my music, and my writing that I didn't even see anything else. But when I did start enjoying movies and TV shows, which my boyfriend introduced me to, because if it weren't for him, I probably wouldn't have watched them. They were actually enjoyable. I found some enjoyable stuff. My ex introduced me to Game of Thrones. My husband now introduced me to a lot of the older movies, and friends have told me movies to try. It only seems to be in the last few years that things have started to take a turn for the worst. When I was little, there was already diversity and rich storytelling along with it. The old movies that my parents showed me and that people introduced me to surprised me with the plethora of diversity they contained, even in films as old as from the 50s. So in my mind, we have already reached the pinnacle of representation, even in gaming as well. The overcorrection reminds me of having an itch on your back that you can't reach because maybe your arms are too short or something, and you ask someone to scratch it for you. They start scratching your back, and you're feeling good as the sensation plateaus. And you're stuck in the midst of this orgasmic sensation as their freshly cut nails rake over your delicate skin. And then just like normal, the itch goes away. And that's, hoping that it doesn't move somewhere else because, those roaming itches that pop up in another spot when you scratch one. But anyway, let's just say that itch has been thoroughly scratched. You're like, damn, that was great. You breathe out a sigh of relief. Your body relaxes, which tells the person that you're okay, that they have done their job and have thoroughly scratched the itch that has been plaguing you for a long time, maybe. They ask you with a gleam in their eye, you like that? And you respond by breathing out in total passion. Yes, thank you so much. You did it. But to your horror, and amidst extreme panic, they continue to scratch. You try to tell them to stop, insisting that the itch has been thoroughly scratched and you're good. However, they refuse. They not only refuse to stop scratching, but they bust down the door with their big linebacker quads, hold you down on the carpet with a strap-on tree trunk around their waist, and start drilling into your body with it, while also going double time on your back with their claws that have now regenerated into werewolf talons. You're screaming from the mountaintops for them to stop, to give you peace. But no, they continue to ravish your back. And now your neighbors can hear you. They come to the window, look through it, and see that you're on the ground being ravaged by this thing. Even the neighbors are screaming too, saying that's enough, which just blends in with your screams. But does the scratcher stop?
Not today.
Now you're lying in a carpet tinged with your fluids and angst. 3 days later, the scratcher is still at it, but now you are nothing but bones. The more you plead, the worse it becomes. The more you stay quiet, it still continues. But if you dare scream out because you've had enough, it just gets worse. I know that was very descriptive, but that's what it feels like with the entertainment industry nowadays. I swear to goodness, the last thing on the table is going to be adult entertainment, and even then, I can see these people clicking on a video that just so happens to feature 2 pale-skinned married people in the act, and then commenting, there's too much brightness going on in this video to the point where I feel like I'm going blind. I'm gonna need you to bring in some color. Also, that angle is very offensive and misogynistic. The dog, yes, women are not dogs, so stop using that position. It's dehumanizing. We want representation, but not too much of it. Oh, and even though we're against dehumanizing, it's okay if the dude is the one in that role that's offensive for the women. I envision people like this waking up super late in the day with no job while sipping their $8 cup of coffee that they really can't afford because their rent is so freaking high for such a small area that they live in, and then instead of meditating or trying to make themselves better, they crack their knuckles and sit there wondering, now, what can I set fire to today? What can I destroy? I swear we have a lot of the populace out there on their villainous arc trying to pretend that what they're doing is best for mankind, and that is true nasty villain work. It's convincing everyone that you're not a villain under the guise of trying to protect people, when in fact you don't care about that at all, because if you did, you would respect when the people you claim to protect tell you that they don't need protection and that they actually enjoy these things. But no, you think they don't know what they want. You're there to tell them. It's your job to guide them because they cannot make decisions on their own. Meanwhile, all that's happening is severe projection from your own insecurities, which led you down this villain arc in the first place. The thing that villains never account for, though, when making their plans, are the heroes. And anybody that stands up to them is one, and there are a lot more of them than there are villains, because it turns out that people don't like being pushed around and having things constantly taken away from them while they're being gaslit into thinking everything is fine and they're just being stupid.
Whether to assist or ignore them is entirely up to the player.
Motherfucker!
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in their cradles, profanities.